Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show, while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've all seen that ever since that unspeakable, senseless, and dare I say heinous tragedy unfurled before the shocked and horrified eyes of the nations on St. Valentine's Day 2018 there at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Broward County, Florida, there has been a bit of an emotional push towards gun control. And we all know that we have seen that time and again, to where it's ad infinitum, that they always come forth, they being these subsects in society, always come forth and attempt to lay the blame at the feet of law-abiding, gun-owning, decent American citizens, and our fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms, as is codified by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Second Amendment to the Bill of Rights, or first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. This has been the case for generation after successive generation. We always see this, and it's predictable. Yes, it's nauseating, but it's nauseatingly predictable, because it's always the same thing. It's always we have to blame an inanimate object. They try to ascribe sorts of supernatural powers to an inanimate object. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, what is a firearm if it is nothing more than a mere tool? That's exactly what it is. That's what it has always been. That's what it was designed to do. Yet you hear the emotionally charged arguments, contentions, and positions by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, and increasingly, unfortunately, from some groups on the right. You know, why do you need a military-style weapon? A weapon of war that was solely designed to kill? That's the same narrative we have heard over again. But the fact of the matter is, this is not something that should even be up for debate. The Bill of Rights, or first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution, was included in the Constitution because these are our natural law rights. These are rights that are self-evident. These are the inalienable rights. That means these rights cannot be taken away from you, that these rights were not handed to you or ascribed to you by the prowess or power of government. No, it comes from a higher power. And this is something that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have discussed, dating back to our premiere episode, which aired on September 11th of 2015. And we always come to this point because it is something that we have to hit over and over again. We have to hit it over and over again because the left is doubling down on their efforts to strip, deprive, encroach, abridge, belittle, and alienate law-abiding, red-blooded, hard-working American citizens from coast to coast and border to border here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we've seen it so many times. You would think that if we could continue to basically discuss with these people, that they would be ready, willing, and able to listen to a modicum of logic and a modicum of sense. But the simple truth of the matter is these people are not looking to see the truth. These people are not looking to find what matters to our way of life, to our system of government, to the things that have been, propelling us as a nation and people, but above all, as our Republican form of government. No, they want to say that it's antiquated, that it's outdated. And one of the most intellectually disingenuous, emotionally charged arguments that the proponents for increased gun control always turn to, without fail, is that they try and say that, oh, because you want to preserve your fundamental and inalienable God-given right to keep and bear firearms as codified in the Second Amendment, you must hate children. You must want children to die. You must enjoy the thought of children lying dead in pools of blood on American streets. Yeah, it's rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. It's absolute nonsense. It has no connection or connotation with reality whatsoever, and it doesn't even get to the root problem of these mass shootings. One of the things that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have stressed on previous episodes of our state-of-the-art radio program is that, look, what is the common denominator that we see between the vast majority of these mass shooting incidents that have occurred for generation after successive generation? Well, the Crime Research Institute of America put out a study that said that between the period of 1950 to 2017, that some 98.4% of mass shooting incidents have occurred in gun-free zones. Gun-free zones. That's the problem. You'll forgive me, I'm still having a little bit of congestion of the throat. But these gun-free zones, they are part and parcel and completely reflective of a failed public policy position that has put the American people in jeopardy. We have allowed our children to be placed into these unsafe environments. But the thing that gets me, particularly when you look at the gun control legislation that was just signed into law by Governor Rick Scott of the great Sunshine State of Florida, one of the things they say is, oh, well, look, okay, 18-year-olds should be prohibited from purchasing firearms and ammunition. There's a major constitutional crisis that is created by that. Your rights ascribed to you at the age of majority. And traditionally speaking, in these United States of America, the age of majority, the age when you become a lawful adult, is the age of 18. The 26th Amendment actually states that the right of 18-year-olds to vote shall not be infringed. And all of that arose during the height of the drafting era of Vietnam. It used to be that you had to be 21 to vote, 21 to drink, but didn't have to be 21 to either be drafted into the military or to enlist in the military. You didn't have to be 21 to start a business, to get married, start a family. And so the drinking age, being that of 21 now, is one of the most deplorable laws on the books. Now, those who are in the respective armed forces who are under the age of 21 are allowed to drink on base, but they can't, they can't drink when they're out with their friends in the civilian world. And I've always thought that this was a bit hypocritical. And I think that it's a very weak argument, a very weak basis or premise to set up an argument that, well, look, because Nicholas Cruz was under 21 years old, that anyone who's not 21 should be prohibited from owning a firearm. Well, then why are we forcing them to sign up for the selective services, to be potentially drafted to be sent out to war? Why is it that we can entrust 17-year-olds who can enlist in the respective armed forces of the United States of America to operate fully automatic M16s, yet we would deny them the ability to come home, protect their family, property, their business, their very life, with a gun that's not even of the same make as the AR-15 that has been targeted for much derision time and again throughout this entire debate. And again, it's as I said at the opening of the show, this is not something which should even be open for debate. And I say that is, stop and think about it. If these are our natural law rights, these are the rights that are endowed to us by our Creator based off of the poetic language contained in the four corners, the Declaration of Independence, then why are we even allowing there to be a discussion about whether or not this right can be limited or infringed? I mean, the language within the Second Amendment itself is quite perfectly clear. The right of the people to keep and bear firearms, there's your subjective clause. Yes, the well-regulated militia being necessary for the maintenance of a free state is one of the exemplars of why we have it, and the people make up the militia. But the main part is, the right of the people keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed. There are no modifiers as to when it shall be not infringed, such as the right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed unless they are under the age of 21. It's ridiculous. The vast majority of the soldiers in George Washington's Revolutionary Army in that long, drawn-out, bloody affair known as the American War of Independence were under the age of 21. They were under the age of 18. They had soldiers as young as 10 in some cases. And then, of course, we always run into the same nonsensical argument that is brought up by advocates for increased so-called common sense gun control measures that, well, our founding fathers couldn't have imagined types of firearms that we have today. But again, that is rubbish. The puckle gun was created in 1719, and the Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791. Now, what was the puckle gun? The puckle gun was a multi-fire, large caliber rifle. Yes, they say it's still a flintlock mechanism, but that doesn't matter. Percussion method doesn't matter. The main thing that they always talk about is high-capacity magazines and high-velocity rounds, which is a joke. It basically shows that those who are going out of their way to try and crimp down upon the fundamental and inalienable God-given right of law-abiding, gun-owning American citizens to keep and bear firearms actually have no idea 9 times out of 10 what they're talking about. They want to infringe the right, but they don't know the language, they don't know the proper connotation, or the proper syntax, or the proper usage of language, or even the commonly accepted definitions. They just have an agenda. A very bad agenda at that. This agenda that they're pushing is mainly about power and control. It is not about security. It is not about increased school safety. It is not about helping people. It's about projecting their own fears of what they might do with a firearm because they don't trust themselves, because they basically ascribe human characteristics to an inanimate object that they want to crimp it down, because if they can't, they are afraid of what they might do, or if they envision themselves irresponsibly using a firearm, then how can they trust their fellow citizens, their fellow popular sovereigns, their fellow countrymen and women to use it properly? You see, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to this sort of a collectivism that they attempt to attach to all of this. And that's what they do, time and again, to the point of it reaching ad nauseum. And this is part of the reason why gun rights advocates are rightly concerned whenever we hear these people come forth. And I'll tell you, I've seen it in the annals of social media. all of those who are claiming that we do ourselves a grave disservice by taking such a staunch stance, and your mentioning of due process, having notice and a hearing before a right can be taken away, is nothing more than ipso facto, or as a matter of fact, a roadblock. My response to those people is, if you think those are roadblocks, you're right. Due process, criminal justice system, the requirement of a right to trial by jury, all of those things find in the Bill of Rights. Yes, they are meant to be roadblocks to those who are trying to strip and deprive and belittle and alienate decent, law-abiding citizens of their fundamental and inalienable rights. That means it is functioning just as our founding fathers had originally intended for it to function. That's where the crux of the problem is for these people. And yes, it is a problem for these people because they don't want to seek out solutions. I know Jeremy always likes to say it's an issue, not a problem, because problems don't have solutions, issues do. But in order to have a solution, the people that you are dealing with, or the parties that are involved in the discussions, must actually be proactively seeking what could only be called a solution. And unfortunately, that is certainly not the case that we are encountering with respect to those who are advocates for increased gun control measures. You see, they like to use buzzwords. It's always that dark, twisted game of semantics that Jeremy and I have warned about on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, so-called common sense. See, the reason they portray it in that form and fashion is they want to make it to where if you say that, look, I just want to follow the Constitution. I want strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the supreme law of the land, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, known in the common American vernacular as the Supremacy Clause, is none other than the Constitution itself. Oh, well, clearly, you are reasonable. Clearly, you are unreasonable. Clearly, you are trying to get in the way of making sure that children are safe. And it goes right back to that argument that I mentioned right at the start of the show. Namely, that, basically what you are pushing for is for there to be blood on the street, for children, innocent children, to be dying. And that's the argument. It's the same tired argument the despotic wannabe potentates have used well past any living memory. That's just the way they are. That's the way they operate. That's the way they view the world. And again, it's unfortunate that we find ourselves, but it goes to a deeper issue. And the deeper issue of which I speak is what they are clearly trying to do is to make it to where only the government has the ability to possess firearms. Now, if that sounds like an Orwellian scenario, it's because it is. Anytime a tin-pot dictator is seeking to set up shop or is seeking to set roots in a target society, they always attempt to disarm the citizens. It's as Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote his magnum opus, The Prince, well over several hundred years ago, was saying in that work. The prince who disarms his citizens dishonors. And remember, one of the most important things to our founding fathers during that long, protracted, drawn-out, bloody affair known as the American War of Independence was their sacred honor. But if we actually stop and think about what the problem is, or the issue, the overlying, underarching issue, you could certainly say that part of it, at the very least, so we don't even know what sacred honor is anymore in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. Modern popular culture goes away from that. We've become an instant gratification society, as if that is somehow going to boost us, if that is somehow going to leave us in a better position than we were at the start of all of this. And there's a lack of discipline. In fact, we even punish parents in many instances where they are attempting, or where they attempt to discipline their children. And it also ties into this culture of participation trophies. Now, one of the things that I've seen come to the surface with respect to the survivors of that tragic and heinous act that occurred on February 14th, 2018, is that when they come out and advocate for gun control, there are people on either side of the political spectrum, either side of the political aisle, that say, you can't speak out against these children. Not only are we going to attempt to limit your Second Amendment right, we want to encroach upon your First Amendment right as well. Look, it's as Jeremy and I have always said here at Radio Aviation Excellence Fire. You have to be ready, willing, and able to accept the consequences for your words, deeds, and actions. And that also means that you have to hold others accountable for their words, deeds, and actions as well. And therefore, anyone who comes out and speaks out against the rights of their citizens, or comes out in a form and fashion of attempting to strip and deprive from their fellow countrymen and women their fundamental and inalienable rights, then yes, that is open to ridicule. No, they are not above criticism. No, they are not beyond reproach. Because when we stop and think about it, evaluating it under the totality of the circumstances, and certainly with a modicum of objectivity, it becomes quite clear that they are working for a nefarious agenda. And certainly the way that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have been attempting to stoke the flames, to fan the flames of division and divisiveness, they are seizing upon them in an attempt to push an ulterior motive, to push a propagandist narrative and agenda. Well, enough is enough. Why do we sit back and tolerate this? We certainly shouldn't be. This is certainly not in our best interest, either as a nation and people, yet here we are. This is what we are facing, time and time again, point of it reaching ad nauseum, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the real dichotomies, something that I believe is perhaps the purest form of intellectual disingenuousness that we have seen from this entire affair, is how they sit there and they say, look, these children speak more sense than our elected leaders. We have to turn to them. Their policy seeking to ban the AR, and I love this, 47 or the AK-15. Don't know. Don't. We need to listen to them. But hey, I know. One of the common sense gun control measures we should have is that you have to be 21 to purchase a firearm and ammunition. Okay. If they are too immature, the age of majority, which, as I mentioned earlier during the program, is the age that your rights attach or ascribe to you, then they are certainly too immature to fully exercise their First Amendment rights. You see, that's the way that the agent provocateurs, tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression, begin to set root. Body politique of the land of the free and the home of the brave. They begin to unravel all of the fundamental elements of everything that we hold near and dear as a nation and people. It's the entire goal. Joseph Stalin referred to those people that he could always rely upon to just be sycophantic to him, to be yes men, to be those who ask how high after he tells them to jump, as useful idiots. And there are certainly those on the supposed right, and always within the rank and file of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists, who can only be properly described as useful idiots. They are useful idiots because they are pushing for the same narrative and agenda of limiting rights. Now, why? Well, they think, rather incorrectly, rather erroneously, they believe within their heart of hearts that they are a cut above. That the only reason that these things have never worked in the past is because wrong people have done it. They are somehow now magically beholden by providence above, with lightning bolts being farted down from rainbow clouds, with the ability to know what's best. That if you disagree with them, you are for murdering children, or if you disagree with them, you are clearly not using common sense. Yes, it's all out of the Fabian Socialist Bible, Rules of Radicals, written by that most devious and deviant of Fabian Socialists, Saul Alinsky. You see, they're trying to capitalize off of this. They're trying to capitalize using the principles of propaganda by Adolf Hitler's Third Reich Nazi Germany's propagandist chief, Dr. Joseph Goebbels. The problem that they're going to encounter is the same thing that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have said time and again, right back to our premiere episode. Light of truth will always break through the muck and moreau of these dark and twisted, intellectually disingenuous narratives and agendas that have been foisted against decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens from coast to coast and border to border in the land of the free and the home of the brave for generation after successive generation. It will always break free of that and break through and cause it to unravel, because the truth is much better. It's as Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric. People are very hardwired to believe the truth. You actually have to work much harder to get them to believe a lie. And that is why Goebbels said that the only way for a lie to really become accepted as the truth was for it to be repeated often. But it had to be done in such a way that it couldn't really be contested. Otherwise, people would eventually begin to disbelieve the lie. And I think a prime example of that would have been Berlin, when the Soviets were marching in and Adolf Hitler already went down into the bunker and blew his own brains out in cowardly fashion. Where the people were like, wait a minute. They say that we're still going to win the war. There are Russian troops here, and the Western allies are squeezing from the other side in a giant pincer maneuver, and we don't have the materiel to continue. We don't have the manpower to continue. Somebody somewhere is lying. Well, total war had been repeated by Joseph Goebbels and Hitler in the months leading up to that terrible time for them. But again, the lie cannot sustain itself. The lie could not be continued to be foisted upon the German people, because the German people could see right through it. Rightly so. And the same thing happens with these people who are pushing for supposed, alleged, common sense gun control regulations and measures. And one of my favorite lines that they use is, well, I'm a conservative and I'm a gun owner, but you don't need an AR-15. Last I checked, the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution didn't say, right of the people to keep and bear firearms shall not be infringed unless they don't need it. It's not need-based. These people would stop at nothing to strip us of the best means of defense against a rogue, tyrannical, out-of-control, and ultimately illegitimate government that would be operated by the agent provocateurs of tyranny and despotism. They would look to strip and deprive us of the ability to defend ourselves and our property and our homes and our friends and our family and our loved ones. It's like in the original 1974 Death Wish, where Charles Bronson, playing the architect and designer Paul Kersey, asks his son-in-law, whatever happened to the good old American societal tradition self-defense? His son looked at him and said, Dad, we're not pioneers anymore. Then what are we? What are we? And his son-in-law replied, civilized? And Paul's response was no. No, that's not civilized. No, and he's right. That type of commentary, that line of thinking is absolutely correct. And it was in a direct response to the anti-gun attitudes that really started to entrench themselves in these United States of America after the assassination of JFK in Dallas back in 1963. It started to solidify then. It was started to push then because 1963 was also the year that Charles Whitman, the University of Texas at Austin tower shooter, climbed his way to the top of the University Bell Tower and used a bolt-action rifle to commit one of the worst mass shooting incidents in our entire national history. And you see, that's the next phase. The operation of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. The next phase will be to target bolt-action rifles. Oh, those are military sniper rifles. They've been utilized to kill people at unimaginable distances. That's what they do. Give them an inch and they'll take the whole damn country. That's what my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and I, and even our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, have been warning people about time and time again. And yes, I know that at times it sounds like we are nothing short of a broken record, repeating these same sorts of things. But if you look at the left, and even certain fringe elements that claim to be conservative, or claim to be part of the American political right, you will see that their narrative, their song and dance, their dog and pony show is the same. Instead of saying, look, failed public policy positions that we have implemented in our educational system, that we have implemented in our political system, that we have implemented in popular culture and society, have failed. And have, in no small part, greatly contributed to this, greatly exacerbated this problem. They don't want to do that because they don't want to accept responsibility for their own words, deeds, and actions. And because if they are unwilling to accept their own self-accountability and their own self-responsibility and thereby their own ability to have self-determination, then they want to strip and deprive it from their fellow countrymen and women. Folks, there really is no other way to describe it. There really is no other way to logically connect the dots here as to what their narrative and agenda has been and has always been. And then the other aspect is the way that they treat the National Rifle Association of America, or the NRA, as some sort of a New Age Freemason movement. It almost mirrors, in American history, the Anti-Masonic League. The Anti-Masonic Party was partially dominated by John Quincy Adams, son of the second President of the United States and eventual President of the United States himself. Oh, it's a secret cabal. It's a secret cabal filled with codes and conspiracies that could take this nation down, that could destroy all of our liberties. But just like the anti-Masonic movement, the hoplophobes, those who fear our firearms and our right to keep and bear firearms, are actually standing in staunch opposition to the fundamental roots, to the fundamental principles, to the fundamental tenets of federalism and the natural law that form the bedrock foundation not only of our representative Republican form of government, in other words, this great experiment in representational government, but of our entire culture as well. Freemasons made up a great majority of our founding fathers. In fact, many of the natural law principles and those Enlightenment era principles that shaped the philosophy and the way of thought of our sagacious founding fathers were also part of the Brotherhood of Freemasonry. Well, those who are seeking to strip and deprive law-abiding, gun-owning American citizens of their fundamental and inalienable rights are seeking to ignore that root part of the history as well. And that's an inescapable, self-evident truth. And it seems that with each and every successive passing day, they are growing more rabid, they are growing more out of control, they are seeking to cause even more harm and devastation to the rights of the American people by politicizing a senseless, unspeakable, and heinous tragedy. Shame on them. Shame on them for doing that. But it's as that frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist Kat Sunstein always said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And that's what they're doing here, ladies and gentlemen. That is what they have been doing time and again. And of course, the end goal for their modus operandi is to leave us in a divided state and thereby in a weakened state. It is to control us. That's what it comes down to. That's what it has always come down to. That's why it's important that we are ready, willing, and able as a nation and people to come together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, thereby presenting not only to ourselves, but arguably even more importantly still, to the greater world at large, a unified front, saying enough is enough. We are not going to tolerate further encroachments upon our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Fortunately, when we see that there are those elements, the American political right, who are going out there and ascribing the same wicked characteristics, treating the NRA as though it is the boogeyman, just like the left, they're trying to do the same thing. Now, the NRA has, in the past, supported gun control measures, and they lost members as a result of it. But the type of venom that is being flung at the NRA right now is ridiculous. I even saw in the annals of social media, and I know that I mentioned this in the most recent solo flight special I did, that they were referred to as homegrown domestic terrorists. This was a law school colleague of mine, someone who was in my Phi Alpha Delta law fraternity chapter with me, who ultimately removed me as a friend from this social media outlet because I sat there and said that what was included in Governor Rick Scott's gun control legislation was absolutely violative of the constitutional rights of American citizens. You see, that's the danger we're facing right now, ladies and gentlemen. That is the major cognitive disconnect we have. It is now considered extremist, and it is now considered radical to go forth and to seek to preserve our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. For the life of me, that is something I will never understand. I will never understand it because it is directly contrary to all of the things that made us great in such a relatively brief period of time in our republic's history. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to combat this. And one of the ways that we can combat this is to say, look, part of the problem is it's a lack of understanding when it comes to firearms, how they operate, what they are, what their true power is. And a lack of situational awareness. Increased situational awareness, increased firearms awareness would certainly help reduce some of the problems that we've encountered, or some of the issues that we have encountered recently as a nation and people. But the truth of the matter is, none of these proposed gun control measures, these so-called common sense gun control measures, would have done a lick of good in preventing a mass shooting incident. It's just not, it's not feasible. It doesn't work. But again, it's these people who want to sit there and claim that the NRA is some sort of Masonic plot against liberty, that they are the Illuminati, some other nonsense. It would tell us that, well, we should turn to the government as an end-all, be-all solution for these problems. Or we need to have increased focus on mental health. Of course, who gets to define what that is? Who gets to determine that? Will it be on a case-by-case basis? Or would it be that if you were just diagnosed with, say, attention deficit disorder one time in your life, that you are now no longer a responsible citizen who can keep and bear firearms? See, that's part of the thing. That's part of where it goes. The end goal for those who claim that they are for so-called common sense gun control measures and regulations is to ultimately strip and deprive all American citizens of their right to keep and bear firearms. They may do it by trying to tax it out of existence. They may do it by making the regulations so onerous that it would be just far too difficult to possess them. After all, that's what they did with automatic firearms. Oh, well, we can't really get rid of them. We can tax them, but then not create the tax stamp. It's underhanded methods like that which actually move to undermine the bedrock stability and proper functioning of our representative Republican form of government. There is no and, or, ifs, or buts about that, folks. It is an inescapable, self-evident truth. And let's take, for example, this Parkland shooting incident. What was it? Within the past 2 years, the Broward County Sheriff's Department had 4 deputies not even enter the school when the active shooting situation was going on. That they went out there 19 times to Nicholas Cruz's home. This is the same incident where the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, was made aware of Cruz's statements and even went so far as to admit that they breached protocol when dealing with this situation. We're really going to entrust them with more of that? We're really going to hand over our rights to them when our rights didn't come from them in the first place? It's asinine, ladies and gentlemen. It's asinine because it is a form of cultural suicide. It is a direct attack on our shared national heritage, character, spirit, but above all, identity, both as a nation and people here in the heart of the land of the free and the home of the brave. And the fact that they don't want to admit it, the fact that they don't want to see it, that just speaks volumes as to what it is that they are actually trying to do. And again, remember, these are the same people who can say out of one side of their mouth, oh, yes, we need to turn to these kids. We need to listen to these kids. You dare not speak out against these kids because they survived a horrific incident. But they will also attack the minority chair of the Colorado legislature, a survivor of Columbine, a man who was in the library when that shooting happened, who every year that he has been in office has done one thing that he promised: try to pass legislation that would end gun-free zones in the state of Colorado once and for all. They say that that guy, all of a sudden, that guy is out of his league. That guy's out of his mind. That guy is part of the problem. Insanity. It's absolute intellectual disingenuousness, but that is the way the left engages over and over again ad infinitum. And when you think, if we can show, as we have shown, remember the American Crime Institute Association put out that study that said 98.4% of mass shooting incidents between the time period of 1915 and 2017 occurred in gun-free zones. Why is that not part of the main discussion? Yes, in Governor Rick Scott's bill, he talked about arming teachers, but he also included anti-gun measures that strictly violate the Constitution, strictly violate all that we value as a nation and people. That is intolerable, that is insufferable, that is unacceptable. Yet it is where we find ourselves at the current juncture. And unfortunately, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future unless we, in our individual capacity as American citizens, band together, standing shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, and put our collective foot down and say enough is enough. We have to. We are the only ones that possess the power, the wherewithal, and above all, the authority to do these sorts of things. And that is what we have to do if we are to maintain our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. But it is amazing to see how many, especially in the annals of social media, have gone forth to do anything and everything within their power to try and claim that this is a radical, disconnected point of view on my part. And that's one of the things that the advocates for gun control always do. They always attempt to personalize it. Do this because they know that they cannot win the free marketplace of ideas. because they are basing their entire claim, the entire premise of their argument, off of raw emotional hysteria. Histrionics is certainly not the way to secure our schools and to ensure that our fundamental and inalienable rights are protected from governmental overreach. And when they go forth and try and say that I am doing a grave disservice, or any of us who are fighting to preserve our rights are doing a grave disservice by saying, oh, you should just, give up your rights a little bit. No! These rights are non-negotiable, they're non-delegable, because they are inalienable. I understand that they struggle with this concept. I understand that this concept may be a little bit beyond their mental faculties. But I am not about to give up my rights. And I am not about to allow the rights of my fellow countrymen and women to be encroached by these charlatans, these carnival barkers, these snake oil salespeople. Because when you stop and think about it under the totality of the circumstances and in an objective fashion, that is clearly what these people are. That is clearly what these people are doing. And they are not doing it for the best interests of their fellow popular sovereigns. Part of the reason why I feel as strongly about this as I do is I remember what it was like back in 1993 when the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives descended on a little compound in Mount Carmel, Texas, just outside of Elk, which is just outside of Waco, where I'm from. Claimed that they had illegal firearms, claimed that they were doing all sorts of unspeakable acts, none of which could be corroborated, none of which the sheriff, Jack Harwell, agreed with. They set them on fire. What about those? The children whose right to life was violated by those who were seeking to violate the rights of their parents to keep and bear firearms and to practice their faith and religion as they saw fit. I didn't see the same kind of outcry from the people that are now saying that I should surrender my rights or that I am being an extremist. No, when you still have the memory of burning flesh on your mind, anytime you mention this issue or this incident in American history, that's not extremism. That is me looking upon this from my own personal experiences and saying the government is not this benevolent force that you seemingly think that it is. That there are times when they can go forth and violate the rights of the American people with carte blanche, without even a second thought, because, again, they think they are beyond reproach. They think they do not have to be held accountable for their words, deeds, and actions. And if we start limiting the rights of the American citizens to keep and bear firearms, where does it end? Here's a thought. What if we started taking the approach that they take with the Second Amendment to the 13th Amendment? Oh, well, slavery is usually wrong, and indentured servitude is usually wrong, except in certain cases. Sounds asinine, sounds stupid, sounds illogical. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that it is stupid, that it is illogical, that it is unfounded in any type of honest or accurate representation or discussion of the issues as they are. What if we applied it that way to the Eighth Amendment? Oh, well, cruel and unusual punishment is wrong except in certain instances, like if they're mentally deranged. They are wholly inconsistent in the arguments and approaches that they take with respect to our fundamental and inalienable rights contained within the four corners of the Bill of Rights or first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. That is an inescapable fact that comes to the surface time and time and time again. And yes, I, so long as I have breath in my lungs, will fight them on this. If that makes me a radical, or that makes me an extremist, then I'm in good company, because that is the position that our founding fathers would have held. That is the position that our founding fathers did hold when they went up against the most powerful military force known to man at the latter half of the 18th century, that of Great Britain. That's the other thing. Whether it was the Texas Revolution that started in October of 1835, or the American Revolution that started there at Lexington and Concord, what was the primary impetus that sparked these conflicts of independence? Why, it was the government attempting to strip and deprive the citizens their right to keep and bear firearms and their fundamental right to defend themselves and their properties. They were out to seize the guns and powder, both Gonzales and in Lexington, Concord. The gun grabbers were on the wrong side of history then, just as the gun grabbers are on the wrong side of history today. Again, these are the inescapable facts. They're there, plain as day, for anyone to see, so long as they are willing to look at it under the totality of the circumstances and with a modicum of objectivity. But objectivity is not what the proponents or the advocates for increased gun control are all about, or are about at all. As I have said throughout this entire Solo Flight Special Edition of Radio Aviation Excellence Wright Flying, it's about power, manipulation, corruption, and control. They want you to be docile. They want you to bow down to their whims at any given point in time. Don't let them strip and deprive you, your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. We're not saying that you have to own a gun. But don't tell us that we can't. Don't ascribe the criminality of those who engage in these heinous, senseless, and unspeakable acts on those of us who are law-abiding. Don't tell us that we can't own certain types of firearms. And don't let the background be done by those who drop the ball on more than one occasion, particularly in this Parkland shooting incident. Because at that point, you are no different than the potentates and the agent provocateurs of tyranny, despotism, but above all oppression, who sought to prevent us from attaining our liberty. American War of Independence, Texas Revolution, and in most fights for freedom and liberty that have occurred throughout the course of human events. Don't be on the wrong side. Don't do it. It's not good for you. It's not good for the nation as a whole. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to our state-of-the-art radio program. Sorry that we have not been making shows as much lately. As I said, I had throat issues. I'm getting over it. thankfully. Point where I can do it again. And folks, we couldn't do this show without you. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. We look forward to any thoughts and commentary you have, or even show suggestions. Also, please feel free to follow us either here on YouTube by subscribing, or on our Google Plus page, or on our Facebook page, even on Twitter. The Twitter handle at RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's at RadioAviationEX. There you'll find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, and Blogspot account that is chock full of information. Folks, thanks again for tuning in to the Wright Flyer. We hope to see you again next time. Please do take care.